to my sewing room. There are two themes for today's show. One is called Really Easy and one is called Really Quick. Now, how can I know that? Well, we're going to do a lot on the serger is how I can know that. This is a beautiful baby quilt done entirely on the serger, every bit of it. And I bet you thought, well, you know, the serger is fine for sewing up the insides of clothes, but I could never use it for the outside. I think when you look at this quilt, you just might change your mind. There are other things that can be made on the serger that are absolutely beautiful also. These two pillows are perfect examples of French sewing by Serger. Every bit of these pillows were done on the serger, and one has a robin's egg blue lining, and this smaller pillow has a pink lining. Very, very pretty and very, very easy. Our little doll, you know, we love doll clothes. Our little doll has on a nightgown made entirely on the serger. You see the little peach looking stripes up and down? Well, that is serger stitching. And the little peach stripes around her sleeves are also made on a serger. And then down to her little skirt, there is more trim done by serger. I thought it'd be fun to have a lady's nightgown to match our little girl's nightgown. So this is the ladies' version of the doll's nightgown. This is the ladies' version of the doll's nightgown. You see the serger trim done in absolutely beautiful sunshiny yellow, buttery yellow, one of my favorite colors. Then the faggoting around the waistline where ribbon has been run through, and there's yet more color on the skirt of this nightgown. Today I have as my guest my very dear friend and business colleague, Kathy McMakin. I've invited her to come and share with you the technique boards and the serger techniques for putting together a perfectly beautiful baby quilt. Today I am so pleased to have as my guest Kathy McMakin. Kathy, I cannot wait to see this beautiful serged heirloom baby quilt.
Well, thank you, Martha. Heirloom sewing by Serger is very easy, and heirloom quilting by Serger is very easy as well. Today, we're going to talk about how to do the quilt, and we're also going to show you how to put together this center panel, which is actually strips of things that have been sewn together to create this center. Here we have faggoting, embroidered insertion, lace insertion, embroidered insertion, lace insertion, embroidered insertion, and faggoting. And we've run silk ribbon through the faggoting strips. And there's pieces of fabric on either side of that created panel, and that's how we created that center piece of fabric for our quilt. First of all, we're going to show you how to do heirloom sewing by Serger, which is very, very easy. If you'll look with me down here, we have a piece of lace, embroidered insertion, faggoting, and fabric. Now, to put lace to fabric, which is the same thing as embroidered insertion, since embroidered insertion is actually created with a piece of fabric, what you're going to do is place your lace to your embroidered insertion, and this pattern has a piece, the design pattern on this piece of embroidered insertion has little leaves that come out almost to the edge of the fabric. So what we're going to do is we'll place the lace on top of the embroidered insertion piece, and we'll let the edge of the lace almost come to the edge of the fabric, but we must have a little bit of fabric extending beyond the edge of that lace insertion. Now we're going to take this piece and we're going to serge this together, and on every serger there is a mark on the toe of your foot that you can use as a guide in sewing the lace to the fabric. So we want our needle thread to pick up the heading of the lace and sew it to the fabric at the same time. So what we're going to do is we're going to place this. Now this particular serger has a wall that sticks up on the foot, and here is the wall right here on the foot, and we're going to just place the heading underneath that wall, and we're actually going to be cutting off a little bit of fabric as we go too. So we're going to serge this piece on in, and it's very easy. We just line it up as we go. And we'll just serge it on out. Okay. And here we have a nice rolled hem. We have our serger set up on 3-thread rolled hem, and we have a nice rolled hem where we've trimmed off the edge of that fabric and serged that lace to the fabric at the same time. And then when we open this piece up, we have the two pieces that are sewn together. Now we need to put a piece of faggoting on the other side of this piece of insertion, embroidered insertion, and that way we'll start creating that piece of fabric. So let's get our piece of faggoting, and we'll, this time, instead of sewing right on the faggoting, we're going to sew right beside the ladder of the faggoting, and we need to put it right sides together, so we'll check that a couple of times. And this time, instead of placing it underneath that wall on my foot, we're going to put it right beside the wall. And
How long did you say it takes to make this whole baby quilt?
It takes about 2 hours, Martha.
Wow.
So it's very,
exciting.
very easy. And then we'll serge this piece together. Okay, and we'll open this piece up. And do you see how we've now started creating our piece of fabric for the center of our quilt? We would just continue adding pieces and fabrics and laces, just anything you would like to create for the center of that quilt would just be wonderful. Now we'd like to show you how to actually put the quilt together by Serger. And we're going to go to the boards to do that. I think it'll be a little easier to see. So if you'll come with me to the boards, you can see these are the pieces that actually went together to make the little baby quilt. Now these pieces are going to be, we're going to make a little bit smaller quilt, so it'll just be easier for you to see. So here are the pieces. These are the pieces that have been put together on the serger, just like we showed you earlier. Then you want to take this top, your fancy top piece, and you want to layer it with a piece of lining, with a piece of batting, and with another piece of fabric that will be your backing. So we're going to layer all these together, just like this, so that we have now our fancy top, and then underneath our fancy top, since there's so many things that are see-through on our heirloom sewing, then we have a lining piece, a batting piece, and a back. Then, after you have that rectangle and all those layers put together, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to take, this is for the strips along the outside edge of your center fancy top. You're going to take a wider strip of back fabric, and you're going to take a piece of batting that is the same width as your blue strip around the top, and you're going to layer those together like this, so that you have your batting and your wide back strip, which is white, and your blue strip for the top. You're going to layer those together with the fancy, all those layers of the fancy top in the middle. And then you're going to serge those together with about a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Then we're going to do the same thing for the top. We're going to layer those again for the top. Batting goes first in the back. Then you have your big strip of white fabric. Then you have your sandwich of your top. And then you'll have the blue strip. So we're going to put one strip here and one strip on top. And then we'll trim all those off even, and we'll just repeat that again on each side. This time we'll make our strip as long as both the top and bottom strips that go across the top and the bottom. Then you'll see that what we've done is, do you see how you have now, because we've used those wider strips along the back, you'll have this extra fabric that extends beyond the wide blue strips around the quilt. So to create the sashing for the top, all we do is we'll take that extra fabric and we'll fold it over once. And you can, if you have a lot of excess fabric in here, you can always trim off that corner right there. Then you fold in once, and then we're going to fold in again and fold in again like this, and that creates that mitered corner that you see. And then we just fold in once and fold in again, and then we go back in by machine, and we're just going to top stitch right along the edge, either with a feather stitch or decorative stitch, or even with a straight stitch. Isn't that easy? Now Martha will show you one of my favorite home decorating projects, a satin and lace pillow.
I have a really interesting antique pillow for you today. This pillow is done out of a pink Swiss batiste. It has French laces, 1, 2, 3 strips of French laces on the pink batiste, and the ruffle around the pillow is done out of a magnificent 100% cotton French netting. Now we made it a little bit differently for you. We used ribbons with the French insertion. We did use the 100% cotton double ruffle, the cotton netting ruffle. This is a very interesting technique. You just simply take ribbons and butt them up to the lace and zigzag them together. Of course, this could also be done on the serger, but that is how you make the pillow top. And then after the top is finished, this ruffle is really easy too. It simply is a piece of, a double piece of the netting. Of course, wouldn't you know, when I'm trying to open it up for you, I can't get it open. We've already pressed it together. There we go. One piece of netting, which has been folded double, and the gathering run in it. Now, this is a very fun technique, and the effect is real interesting too. I am simply zigzagging together. By the way, my length is 2 and my width is 3. I'm simply zigzagging together the ribbon and the lace. And by the way, if you have any trouble with the lace kind of scooching up or not zigzagging exactly correctly, then just spray starch and spray your lace just as stiff as a board. It will do a lot better. Also, be sure that you have a very sharp needle, because you see the ribbon and the lace are two very different fabrics. The lace is kind of flippy and floppy, and the ribbon is as stiff as lead. So what you're going to want to be sure to do is to spray starch your lace really, really stiff if it has any tendency at all to pucker or gather. But that really is very pretty, I think. Actually, a very easy pillow that has been interpreted really nicely out of different fabrics. And next, I have a beautiful craft for you. I think this pincushion would make anyone in your family or any of your circle of friends very happy to have it. It is so adorable. It's made out of a little Altoid box, and here is the finished pincushion. It has machine embroidery around the outside, around the square on the top. It's done on, by the way, an antique linen damask napkin. It has Martha stitched out of the sewing machine on it and has braid around the edge. Here is how it is made. First, start with a little Altoid box. Of course, we're going to open it up and put the pins in. Next, I have some batting. I'm going to take some glue, put some glue on the top, and put the batting down. Get a nice little glue on there, glue finish. I think I've already glued myself to the top of the glue. Then, when you're ready to stitch your center decoration, whatever it will be, in this case, I wanted flowers, 1, 2, 3, 4 at each end, so I stitched them first, and then came back in with a feather stitch, and then put Martha in the middle. I have one all finished here, so let's go ahead and construct this little box. I'm going to put this over the top. Now the batting has been glued down. I'm going to open it and come in here and just very carefully, of course I've got to be sure I have it centered, come in here, pull it underneath. You're going to have to work with this a little bit more carefully than I'm doing here. Glue each section, in other words, make it fit, and then glue it down. And after you have glued the top on, then come in here with the red braid and glue it all the way around on the top, and then come to the bottom and glue red braid on the bottom also. And then you have a really cute little finished pincushion. And have you ever noticed when you open these boxes of pins how you could never get them back in the box? If you tried, no matter what you tried, you can't get them back in. Well, it's nice to have a little pincushion box to go ahead and put your new box of pins in. And now I have one of the most beautiful doll dresses that we've ever had on any of our shows to share with you. Our doll dresses for this series are perfect matches to the little girls' dresses, so you'll have a lot of fun, I think, dressing your little daughter or granddaughter just like her doll. This little dress is absolutely wonderful. It has an entredeaux and gathered lace neckline finish, and this is a little purchased trim which has simply been stitched down. There is a wonderful little V point, sort of a pointed piece of this is done out of organdy, by the way, on the sleeves, and the puff sleeves are gathered to purchased trim and gathered lace. A little tiny piping goes around the waistline, and notice how full this skirt is. That's one of the things I like best on doll clothes is full skirts. Now this is a little bit of purchased trim, and what I really love is this little V, the little number of V's, looks like little tulip leaves actually, that are attached to the bottom of the dress before the fancy band, before the ruffle is put on. This is also stitched down using not a wing needle, but just a regular needle pin stitch. And then the lace on the bottom is flat, also stitched on with a regular needle pin stitch or Madeira applique stitch. Now let's see how easy those components are to make. First of all, we're going to make these little V's that go around the skirt and that also go over each sleeve. To make the V's, I cut out a piece of organdy. I put my lace edging down all the way on the edge, put a pin at the bottom and a pin at the top. Then I fold it back on itself. Remove the top pin so it goes through both layers. And there we are. That is a perfect miter which has been folded in. Now it's going to be necessary to stitch that miter, so I'm just using a regular needle. I have used a pin stitch or Madeira applique stitch, and my width and length are both set at 2.5. Now I can also use a wing needle if I would like to for this stitch. However, I thought it'd be fun just to make this really delicate since it's going to be, okay, now there I'm at the corner, so I'm going to flip around here. And then I'll start back on the other side. Since this is a doll dress, I thought it would be really delicate just to use a regular needle and make it look really like the Point de Paris stitch by hand. Now that will stitch, I'm using that stitch to stitch on all of our laces. Then I'm ready to attach these little V's to the skirt. Here I take the little, by the way, this is the ruffle for the skirt. I take the little V's, however many I want. Here I have 1 and then 2, and I put them on top of the skirt and I run 2 rows of gathering. Here's 1 row of gathering and here's another row of gathering. And then after I run the gathering rows around, I will simply gather it. And after I have sewn the lace on the bottom, here we go, onto the bottom edge, then I'm going to lift it up and trim away the excess skirt. Now here is the skirt after it has already been gathered. All right, I have my little V's on there and the full gathered ruffle, and I've taken the little leaves and simply put them down on top, and that is my little purchase trim that makes the skirt so pretty, I think. And the bodice is really easy to put together also. I have the bodice cut out right here, and I have the line marked for my little purchase leaves. Now let me pull the little tulip leaf up over here. You see I've already stitched in my sleeves, although when you do doll dresses, you do not sew up the side seams until last. Then I'm going to put my little V's on right over the cap sleeve. Then I'm going to pin my little purchase trim down, and I'll come up here and pin the purchase trim, and then I'm going to stitch all of that down together. And I'm going to do the same thing on the little sleeve. I'll gather the sleeve, finish the lace at the bottom, and then put my little leaves down and simply gather them down. And now I have an antique technique to share with you. I am particularly fond of garments made in the 30s. This happens to be one of those little dresses which we all just love it. Back at the shop, we thought this was one of the prettiest little antiques I'd bought in a long time. This is silk georgette pink. It has a little scalloped front here and very sweet, very simple, just little butterfly sleeves. Then the little waistband has something that looks a little bit like smocking below it, but it really isn't. It's just little gathers. 1, 2, 3, let's see, 4, 5 little rows of gathers. Then look at the skirt. I just love it. It's pleated, kind of box pleated old pieces of fabric which have been curved and circled, one curve up, one curve down, and then a little scallop skirt with a rolled and whipped hem on the bottom. Now it was these little pleats that we wanted to show you how to do it. We have used cotton for our sample for you. Here is the cotton. Here's the way the pleats look after we've fixed them and pleated them. Now here's how to do it. First of all, we serged along both edges, serge and serge to give us a finished edge. Then this has to be done by hand. Let me hold it up here so you can see how easy it is to do. All right, I'm going to bring this dot down to the edge, and then I'm going to bring the next dot, which is right there, over and match it up with that dot. And I have made some pleats. It's now time to take my thread, which of course you're not going to use black thread when you're making yours, but I'm going to take the black thread and just do a little running stitch to hold down that box pleat. 1 or 2 would be okay. I believe 1 will hold it just fine. Now, that next little dot, I'm going to just fold it under And then the next little dot, I'm going to bring it underneath to meet that first dot. And the next little dot, I'm going to bring it underneath too, because I have to have 2 pleats on the top and 2 pleats on the bottom. And then after I match those dots, I'll come in here and once again do a running stitch. You could even just leave the needle right there if you wanted to. Now I'm going to fold this one over again, bring it to the middle, bring the next dot over to match up the first dot. That's 2 on the top. Maybe run 3 little stitches in there. I think I'll go ahead and pull that one through. Now then, that is how you do those box pleated. That's the first step. Now to make them kind of smushy at the top, that was pretty easy to do also. After you do your little box pleats, come in here, pick up this part, the middle of the pleat, pick up the other middle of the pleat, and simply with your needle and thread come in and whip those 2 together. See, I've already done that on these. That one's been whipped together, and these 2 have been whipped together. These have been whipped together, and those have been whipped together. And that's what it looks like after you stitch them all together. Let me get the little dress up here one more time and show you how pretty that is when it's done in silk georgette. See how the little box pleats have been pleated twice, and the little box pleats have been pulled up. I just think that is one of the sweetest dresses I've ever seen. And now won't you come along with me to my attic? In the last 4 or 5 years, I have found it more and more difficult to find really elegant embroidered Victorian pieces. This blouse is truly magnificent and it has all hand embroidery. But first I want to share with you the top. Look at the stay that's in this. That is metal, just twisted metal that holds the collar up. Aren't you glad we don't have to wear those things around our necks? This blouse, the embroidery is beyond magnificent. Every stitch of it is by hand. And this is a drawn thread work where they actually pull the threads out of the batiste, went back and stitched over it, and then there are those really neat looking little spider webs that have been stitched in between. More handwork all the way down to the bottom. And you know, this lady had cut all the buttons off the back of this blouse, I would imagine, to use on another blouse, so I'm not going to show you the back because I didn't have any antique buttons to replace them with. For our Sewing from the Heart today, I have a really neat letter from the American Sewing Guild, the Cincinnati chapter. This is from Janet Marshall from Wyoming, Ohio. Dear Mrs. Pullen, for the past several years, members of the Cincinnati American Sewing Guild have been participating in the Camp Clothes for Kids project of the Salvation Army. Members have donated materials and sewn numerous laundry bags and camp clothes for children attending Camp Swanakee, a local summer camp for underprivileged children, and this is run by the Salvation Army. For example, during the past year, our organization made and donated 29 laundry bags, 76 shirts, 63 shorts, 2 pairs of pants, 1 nightgown, and 9 sweatshirts. We think this a worthwhile cause and provides children with the types of clothing they need to enjoy their camp experience. It is also a great way for members of the Cincinnati American Sewing Guild chapter to utilize their talents. Well, Janet, it looks to me like all of you ladies in the Cincinnati American Sewing Guild have just done a fantastic job for children who really did need some clothes to go to camp. And it also seems to me like the Salvation Army has done a really wonderful job in providing summer camp for these children that I feel sure would not have been able to have gone to summer camp otherwise. When I think back upon my own unbelievably wonderful Girl Scout camping days, I just think it's a wonderful experience for children to have, and yet all children, of course, cannot afford to go. And thanks to you ladies and the Salvation Army, a lot of kids in your area did get to go to summer camp. Thank you so much for joining me in my sewing room today, and I certainly hope that you'll be able to come next time.